Welcome to the Creative Tools Podcast. My name is Ashay, and I'm immensely passionate about using technology for creativity. On this podcast, I talk to various creators about what tools and technology they use to be creative. My guest today is Tom Sixsmith. Tom Sixsmith makes custom door harps in his studio in California. Door harps are mounted on every interior door and add a musical charm every time the door is opened or closed. Originating from Scandinavia to welcome good spirits, custom door harps are beautifully crafted and reflect a special interest, expression, sport, craft, hobby, or special occasion. Hey Tom, thanks a lot for visiting my podcast.
Hey, Ashay, glad to be here. Thank you.
So my first question is, what do you create?
I create door harps. Door harps are a Scandinavian traditional item, and they're used on an inside door. And the purpose of them was to drive out the evil spirits. And I first came across door harps maybe 30 years ago. I was at an Irish fair, and I saw one, and I purchased one, and I had it in my house. And I've always loved it because it's kind of a neat thing. And so I recently kind of semi-retired and was looking for something that I could do in my retirement years. And I was looking for something that I could create, I could work with my hands, something that was different, and also something I could go around the country and sell at craft shows and do a little bit of traveling, meet some people, go to different places. And the door harps are, not a lot of people know about them. So I thought they were kind of different. But what I've done is I've taken, most door harps just say kind of welcome or have different things like that. I've taken it to a personal level. So I try to make it reflect people's interests, perhaps their occupation, their beliefs, their systems, and just take a little bit different level to it. So that was what I had in mind when I started our custom door harps operation.
So do you always take people's ideas and then put them in door harps, or do you also create some door harps that say other than welcome?
Yeah, and it's kind of from the word custom door harp. So I have some standard ones that I've made, about 70 of them, that I go around and show. And I've tried to take all the different kind of sports, perhaps some people's favorite teams, their interests, or just some sayings, different, well, people like birds, people like cooking, people like they're like canoeing or hiking or whatever I do to reflect that. But I also do custom ones, and that's kind of one of the other things I can do. So if there's somebody that has an anniversary coming up, then I can make a door harp that reflects the names of the people and the date, or a new baby welcoming, or for instance, I'll have one that says, welcome to the Joneses house, and have a particular image there that they want to be reflected. So yeah, there is a custom aspect of it. And I always love the challenge. Okay, what can you make me this? Can you make me that? And so that's kind of the fun part of it, kind of the creative part of it. I had somebody that said, well, my son's he's a conductor, and I want this thing to say music for life. So I an image of a conductor with a baton, and I said just that. And so there's a little bit of the challenge on what somebody wants, but usually through the combination of creating because you have to create a chamber within the harp for the music to resonate. So you have some openings there, and then I'll do somewhat of a combination of carving as well as some routing of the wood itself.
So can one door harp sound different than another one?
They can. It all depends on how you tune it. I'm not musically inclined, and I state that flat out. But the strings are 3 different lengths, so they do have a slightly different tone to them. And there's a marble that that hits it. And if it's not exactly in the center, it'll be a little bit different tone than others. But um, the, the door harps themselves are, they just make a slight chime is what they do. And every time and the inside door is open and closed.
But in general, I mean, not necessarily just your door harps, but in general, can they be made to sound with like some specific notes?
I don't think they can. I mean, and I haven't dug into it deep enough to see if that is a particular interest, because it's just a time at the end of the day. Now, if somebody has a musical ear and they're sensitive to that, then they may want to have, you know, I want this to be a C note or something like that. It's as I said, not my forte.
Okay. So I want to talk about like 3 sections in this interview. So the first one is pre-creation part. So before you start creating, what tools do you use for inspiration and that part? Then the actual creation. So how do you create? And then post-creation. So let's focus on the pre-creation part. So how do you receive inspiration for making door harps? How do you record that inspiration? And how do you retrieve the inspiration when you actually want to make one?
So when I came up with the my base number of them that I wanted to create a display with, I had a checklist of different interests that I thought people would like. I thought that, for instance, a parent or a grandparent would want to have, if their son or son or daughter played a particular sports, like hockey or soccer, of course, or any of those. So I made a number of them that reflected the most standard sports that you see. And then I also looked at different hobbies and interests that people would be interested in, and kind of came through a checklist. And so I tried to balance it out so that I would have a fairly reflective display that would kind of hopefully get the universe of people out there and capture their interest. So and then of course, as I said, there's the custom side of it, and I've made a number of these as gifts for people, and they all love them. I made one for a cancer patient, a recovered cancer patient. She said it was one of the best gifts she's ever gotten, because it kind of just reflects that emotional appeal to her. It's something very, very personal to her. So that's kind of the background as to how I put the display together. Now, how I get the images, if that's kind of the next segue there, I simply look for the particular topic that I'm looking for. For instance, if it's a baseball or something, or a football player, then I typically just go to Google, and then I'll get a silhouette image. And you can usually find a host of them on there, and you just simply would scroll through there and find one that fits for what I'm looking for. And there are certain things like a bicycle is really hard to do, because once you start cutting the wheels out, you lose everything on the inside. So you have to be kind of conscious of what that image is going to look like when you go to cut it out on the router. But there's ways you can manipulate the image. So I bought a few programs, so I'll import that image into a GIF or a GIF file or whatever I need, and then I have to create an ESP file that vectorizes it. So it takes that image that is a 2D image, and then basically makes a vector of it, so it's a series of straight lines. And then in that program, you can also you can kind of move those lines and massage those lines as needed to create the image. And then, for instance, if the distance between two objects is too close, and when you go to cut it out, you're going to lose the part. It's just going to simply, it's not strong enough to support that. Like, for instance, I was doing the tines on a fork for the chef one. And You have to be able to make those wide enough that you can still have the material left when you're done cutting it.
Which software is this? The one that you just mentioned, that vectorization?
I use Corral for the image, and then there's a Vectrex, which is part of the CNC program that came with the router that I bought. So there's the CNC router, and then they provide software that converts all that to what they call G code, so that tells the router what to do.
I'm not familiar with this device called CNC router. What does this do?
CNC is computer numerically controlled. And these are either, you can have lathes, you can have routers or router tables and mills. But essentially what it is it takes and a router is simply like a hand router, like you would have, and it's mounted on a table with stepper motors that move the router in its position, either circle, up and down, or whatever. And so you have to, once you get the program in and you load it onto, you have to convert it to the G code, as I said, and then it will, you plug it into the router. And I have a relatively small one. Mine's about 18 inches by maybe 12 inches. So it's a relatively small table, but it's perfect for my application. So, and then you have to put different bits in there. You have to put, if you're going to carve the name or letters, then you use a different bit for that. If you're cutting out holes, then you'd use a different bit for that. If you're drilling holes, you use a different bit for that.
So is it like a reverse 3D printer? Like it carves letters on letters or image, whatever you feed to it on a wooden block?
Correct. It's simply similar to that kind of. It's basically like if 3D printer is basically coming along and depositing material in a certain location repeatedly. And this is sort of the same type of thing, the same sort of drive that moves it in a two-dimensional, but on the end of it, you have a bit that's cutting through wood.
So it's like a reverse 3D printer. It's not depositing solid. It's actually taking away material. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the 70 ideas that you had, not the custom ones that you get from your customers, but the 70 ideas. So do you only have those, or do you continuously add stuff to it based on your experience and your what you talk with customers, and then make something new?
That's a good point. It is constantly changing, because I can see that there's certain tastes that people migrate to. The ones that are reflective of the home, and they're kind of the warmth side of it. Like the peace to all, and I've had some shalom and difference. I also try to reflect different ethnic backgrounds as well. But yes, I can see that there's a migration towards some of the more warm type of things. So I'm looking at constantly adding those and the kind of replacing the ones that are not moving with ones that I see that are moving more often.
And where do you keep this checklist? Is it just in a notebook or somewhere digital?
Well, I keep a list of everything that I make. And so what I do when I go to a show, I have an actual picture of the harp. It's behind the actual harp. So if I sell one of the harps, I still have a picture there of the one that they could buy. If I don't have one there, then they say, oh, well, I can make that for you. And then so it continues to give an expression of what is available as far as my offering. So I don't just have a blank there.
No. What I'm saying is this list of harps that you have already made, this list of 70 harps, and you are saying it's continuously changing. That list is a physical list somewhere in a notebook, or is it like in an Excel spreadsheet or somewhere else?
It's in an Excel spreadsheet. I pretty much do most of my stuff in Excel. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, it's an Excel spreadsheet. Has it ever happened to you that an idea struck you that you could make like this message on the harp, but then you didn't get around making it, and then like 2 years later you completely forgot about it? Has it ever happened?
I can't say that it has, because usually if I get an inspiration for something, then I'll just kind of plug right into it and go ahead and make it. But yeah, no, it hasn't
Okay.
happened.
Okay, great. The reason I'm asking is I mean, I'm a filmmaker, so because I make films, I also watch a lot of films, but I'm not necessarily continuously making films all the time. So whenever I watch something, if I find something inspiring, I kind of just text it to myself. So it's in my text box. But then 2 years down the line, when I'm making a film, I always struggle going back to the inspiration that I have recorded 2 years ago, because I most of the times I don't even remember that I had something recorded. So the moment of inspiration hitting me and the moment of creation are like separated by years sometimes. So that's why I asked this question. Um, so so let's now move to the creation part. So you mentioned that you have a software where you could load images and then you could try something, but do you use that software also as a pre-visualization software for your creations? And then you create, or you create something and if you don't like it, then you create another one? How does it work for you?
Well, the software set up that you can simulate the actual cutting ahead of time, so you can see if it'll tell you if you're cutting too deep into the wood, or you like when you put you have an outline of the image, you can run the router bit on the inside, on the line, or on the outside of the line. So you have different ways that you can manipulate the tool, and then you can play with that and say, well, okay, well, I better run this on the inside of the line because it gives me more space for the finished product or something like that. So yes, you can simulate the carving prior to actually doing it.
Is this in Corel, the software that you use for images, or this is in the CNC router software?
That's in the CNC software.
Oh, okay. And do you literally like see the block, the 3D block digitally in front of you before you make?
It does give you a 3D image, and you can manipulate it and turn it so you can say how far into the wood you're cutting or things like that. For instance, like if you do carving for letters, if you carve too deep, they start to kind of mesh together and then you start to lose definition. So you can do some things like reduce the depth of penetration, and you can play with it that way.
How do you decide on which font to use for the letters?
I use basically two different fonts. Lucendia or something is for my kind of my scriptive, and I use Times Roman for the basic ones.
But if a custom order comes to you with maybe some handwritten text or something like that, could you make that happen?
Yeah, because you have the like typical Microsoft Word or whatever, you have quite a host of different fonts that are available for you.
Oh,
But
okay.
they may not always carve the same way. What they look like in printing versus carved wood, and you have to have the right bit to make the carving look right. There's all different kind of degrees for the bit for the carving that you can choose from.
But then if, like, for example, if I want to order a custom harp with my handwriting on it, then you would probably make an image of handwriting and then carve the image on the harp. Is that a possibility?
I believe it is. I could basically scan your handwriting, for instance, and then import that into the program and then simply overlay it and then resize it as needed to fit the harp.
I mean, the reason I'm asking is I'm a big fan of like custom fonts because I mean it's just like me being stickler for being my voice in the fonts. So I found this tool few days ago called Calligrapher, which is a free tool where you can make a font from your handwriting.
Huh.
So it kind of prints you out a template of all the glyphs that you need to write, and then you write in your handwriting, you scan it, and then it makes like a vector version
Wow,
of your handwriting, and it basically becomes a font of your own handwriting. So
crazy.
it's a very custom made font.
Very custom, yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about the post creation part. So once you have created your creation, how do you release, how do you distribute, and how do you market your creations?
I do have an on-site or our website, and actually I'm fairly recent into this. I've gone to maybe a dozen shows and such. The one in Santa Clara was probably one of the biggest ones. As I said, I'm semi-retired, so I'm still doing some work. So I haven't dove into it fully, but the website promoting that. Etsy would be another avenue that I could sell because these are handcraft items as well. But I haven't really pushed into the marketing side of it as much as I should or I will.
So do you use social media at all for letting people know about your creations?
I don't.
Do you plan to use it, or you don't?
Yeah, I do plan to, but as I said, I'm not the. I just started this just when COVID hit, so the number of trade shows that I could go to was severely limited, if any. And now that that's being relaxed, I'm starting to get out a little bit more. And I'm probably looking for my kids to help me on the social media side, since it's again not my expertise.
Uh, I didn't get to the part of like the actual wires that you add on the harp. So uh, are those also custom made, or do you how where does that material come from? The marbles and the cords.
Yeah, maybe just even to back up a little bit. So I have to make blank pieces of wood that I'm using to start with a piece of pine, 1x8. I cut that into a certain size. I have to drill out a 4.5-inch diameter hole from that. And then I glue birch on either side of that. So I have a set size of wood. It's basically 10x8 to start with. So those blanks are, every blank is, I start with that. So once I have the blank, I do the creation, I go through and I cut the actual harp out of that piece of wood. I now have to I have to stain it, of course, and I add they called zither pins and posts. And I use a 40 gauge steel musical wire for the harp music wires. And so I have to pre-wind those so they fit on the post, and then I insert them and tighten them until I hear a certain resonance. And then I have to add the marble ball with the string attached to it. So I have to have a device that I can mount the string to it. I have to glue that on. Add some nails to the top of the harp to mount them to, and then simply mount the chiming balls to the nails at the precise level so that they strike the center of the ball with the wire.
Okay. So what is the biggest challenge you face in your creation process?
Biggest challenge in the creation process, it's coming up with the right image to begin with, because there's so many different offerings. For instance, and I've done a few sports teams and things like that. And you have to look at it. As I said, there's certain, you got to be conscious of when you cut the center pieces out, do you lose something else? In other words, if you cut an eyeball out, you want to still have the pupil there, you're not going to have that pupil anymore because everything drops out. So that's kind of part of the challenge. But it's usually after maybe takes between a half an hour, 45 minutes to finalize a design, to create the vectors and to manipulate it. So probably more of my biggest challenge is on the marketing side, which is trying to get the name out there and to sell more that way.
And how has digital technology impacted your creation process?
Well, I couldn't do this at all without the CNC router. I mean, that's really the key to this. You could, if you had a scroll saw, there would be a means of doing that, but I don't think you could get anywhere near the precision that you can. And to do it with the scroll saw, you'd have to make a pattern. You would have to embed that onto the piece of wood, glue it on. Then you'd have to physically route those around and hand route them, I should say, with a scroll saw. And if you're really good at it, you could probably do that. I know some people that utilize that. But to come up with all the different variations and the customizing of it, really has to use the CNC router. I mean, it's a great tool. I absolutely love working with it. It's a lot of fun.
When you were talking about challenge with coming up with images, I just thought about something. So when I make films, I have to make storyboards, which are also images. And I am a horrible sketcher. Like, I cannot sketch. But I can't necessarily hire someone to sketch for me. So I found this program called DALL-E, DALL/E, not slash E, -E, where if I add text, it will create an image for me from that text. And it was very liberating for me because I can just say, okay, I want a close-up of a woman and her kid next to a beach. I mean, next to an ocean on a beach. And then it would create like an image for me, which was, again, as I said, like, I couldn't sketch. So if I saw a sketch in front of me, and that was really great. So maybe that is something that you could try as well. Instead of searching for images on Google, you can create an image for you. It's a machine learning algorithm where you type in text and it creates an image for you, which is a
that is crazy stuff.
And the more description you give to that program, the more the detailed the image would be.
More detail,
yeah.
That's called DALL-E, DALL-E.
Yeah, and it's right now it's completely free. You just have to request access for it as a creator. If you Google it, you will find it. It's DALL-E.
Very cool.
Yeah. I mean, the fun part is it can create like any kind of image. Like, it can create even an image with like Van Gogh style painting as well, because it has all of this think of it as like it has this training data of like multiple images, and then it is learning from that data and creating an image for you. I mean, I have seen like some instances where like people actually created images with that and then sold those as paintings. but that's irrelevant. That's probably not an ethical thing to do as an artist. But if you want an inspiration for an image, you could get that image from it. That's what I'm saying. So
I could see where that may be a useful item.
Yeah.
Just to try it out anyways. Yeah.
So my last question is, what is the vision of your creations, what is your vision for your creations? Like with the tools and technology that you see around yourself, do you see creating in a different manner in future?
I don't think so. The CNC router. The only other thing that there is a laser etcher, which you can attach to, instead of using a router itself, it uses a laser to burn images. Those are fairly common. I mean, you see those in a number of different applications. For me, that's the only thing where I could see where it could be an extension of what I'm currently doing. For instance, if I wanted to add fine detail, because if you wanted to add a lot of text, it would be difficult to etch, to carve it into a relatively small space, but it would be very easy to do with a laser printer, a laser etcher, I should say, yeah. And they're relatively inexpensive. They're $300 or $400. So.
Okay, great. All right. Thanks a lot, Tom, for your time. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you, Ashay. Appreciate being here.
Thanks for tuning in. If you are a creator, I would love to talk with you. Please connect with me through my website or social media. See you in the next episode.